She couldn't even pronounce the name of the dish on the menu. That was the billionaire's cutting joke. The entire room erupted in laughter, except for the waitress. And when the black server calmly corrected each French word he mispronounced, the laughter died instantly. This was not merely a story of humiliation, but of a hidden talent finally given voice. Inside Les Papillons, a slice of French elegance tucked into Manhattan's opulence, crystal chandeliers glittered overhead like tiny suspended stars. A grand piano in the corner filled the air with gentle classical melodies, mingling with the heady aroma of truffle-infused butter and rosemary-roasted lamb. Pristine white tablecloths draped every round table, highlighting gleaming silverware set to perfection. A scene reserved exclusively for the elite. Each guest seemed born to savor the privileges life had bestowed upon them, radiating confidence and nobility. At the center of this lavish dining room sat a special table reserved for billionaire Leonard Dawson, a man whose name was synonymous with multi-million-dollar investments and blockbuster Wall Street deals, but also legendary arrogance. Tonight he arrived flanked by his most important partners, all dressed impeccably, their wrists adorned with expensive watches, catching the warm glow of chandelier light. Standing beside that table was Zoe Brooks, a young African-American server quietly poised to take their orders. Zoe possessed a unique allure. Her sleek black hair was neatly tied back, her healthy brown skin glowed, and her deep, intelligent eyes spoke of a reserved strength. She wore a crisp white blouse and a perfectly pressed black apron, embodying professionalism and seriousness in every detail. With impeccable posture and a polite, composed smile, she approached Mr. Dawson's table. "Bonsoir," Zoe greeted softly in French. "Are you ready to choose your appetizers?" Leonard raised an eyebrow, glanced at her, then waved the French, printed menu, its elegant script rendered on heavyweight paper, like a flag of annoyance. He frowned, hesitated, and deliberately mangled the name of the famous dish. "I'll have foie gras with, what is this called? Boule base?" he declared loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. Zoe tilted her head politely and offered a gentle smile. "You mean foie gras with bouillabaisse, sir?" For an instant, Leonard's smirk froze. Then he sneered mockingly, turning to his companions and speaking loud enough for all to hear. "Look at that! She can actually read the menu! How surprising!" Laughter exploded around the table, sharp and derisive. His partners, already tipsy on fine red wine, eagerly joined in, regarding Zoe as nothing more than a source of entertainment, an inconsequential amuse-bouche in their grand feast. Zoe remained still, her face serene, though her pen, clutching hand, trembled ever so slightly. Her deep eyes flickered with hurt that she fought to hide. She said nothing further, simply nodded and recorded the order with quiet dignity, continuing her work with absolute professionalism. In that brief moment, time seemed to stand still around Zoe. She had endured countless scornful looks like this before. Each time, she remained silent, bearing it patiently, because she knew her true worth did not lie in their cruel words. She silently reminded herself that sometimes silence can speak more powerfully than any retort. Turning and walking back toward the kitchen, Zoe heard the echo of laughter trailing behind her, each jeer a tiny blade striking at her pride. It reminded her that no matter how skilled or intelligent she was, in their eyes she remained just another black waitress unworthy of respect. What Leonard Dawson could never know, however, was that beneath that modest uniform and behind that composed, courteous smile lay a vast world of knowledge, extraordinary linguistic talent, and a love of culture she had nurtured for years in secret. His arrogant joke had lit the fuse for a remarkable journey to come, one in which Zoe Brooks would rise from the shadows of servitude to claim the respect and place she had always deserved. With the kitchen door closing softly behind her, Zoe drew a deep breath and gripped her order pad tightly. She told herself this was only the beginning, and that one day soon, those who had once dismissed her would be forced to stop and listen to Zoe Brooks with the reverence they had so long withheld. When the kitchen door clicked shut behind Zoe, the taunting laughter still echoed faintly in the distance, like persistent little waves crashing into her mind. She slipped off her apron slowly, hung it carefully on the small brass hook by the wall, then stepped out of Le Papillon's lavish dining room and into her own world. Once outside, a cool night breeze brushed her skin, causing Zoe to shiver slightly. The lights of Manhattan's towering buildings reflected off the damp pavement, creating shimmering ribbons of color. In stark contrast to the restaurant's warm, refined atmosphere, Zoe blended into the bustling crowd. People who never seemed to sleep, each carrying their own loneliness and unspoken desires. The rumble of the subway train through dark, crowded tunnels carried her back to her modest Brooklyn apartment. Zoe's neighborhood stood in stark relief against the glamour she'd left behind. Faded paint on the buildings, a yellow, tinted street lamp casting a weak glow over the narrow lane leading to her front door. She climbed the creaking staircase, each step protesting under her tired feet after a long day's work. Inside her apartment, Zoe called softly, "Nina, I'm home." From the living room came a youthful voice tinged with frustration. "Sis, I just don't get it. I hate geometry." Zoe offered a gentle smile as she entered the room. There, sprawled on the floor with textbooks open all around and notebooks filled with angry scribbles, was her younger sister. 16-year-old Nina looked as delicate as Zoe did, but her youthful face was clouded with exasperation and self-doubt. Sitting down beside her, Zoe laid a reassuring hand on Nina's shoulder and spoke in a calm, soothing tone. "You know, when I was your age, geometry felt like a maze with no way out." Nina looked up, eyes shimmering with tears. "But Zoe, why do I have to learn this stuff? It doesn't help us at all. Look at you. You speak all those languages and you're so smart, and out there people still look down on you." Zoe's heart tightened at those words. She realized her own wounds had unintentionally become Nina's burden, robbing her sister of faith in herself and in life. Taking a deep breath, Zoe met Nina's gaze with gentle firmness. "Nina, listen to me. Knowledge isn't something people use to judge you. It's a key that opens doors no one else can shut. Others may dismiss you because they don't see your true worth, but when you hold your head high knowing what you know, no one can knock you off your feet." She picked up Nina's notebook, sketched simple shapes with her pencil, and patiently walked her through each step. Gradually, Nina's tension eased, her eyes softening as she followed every stroke on the page. "See," Zoe continued, "these things may seem meaningless at first, but if you uncover their patterns, you won't be afraid anymore. Just like in life, when you understand yourself, you'll never fear what others think." Nina nodded thoughtfully, silent for a long moment, then whispered, "Zoe, today at the restaurant, did they make you sad again?" Zoe paused before offering a comforting smile. "They may try to hurt me with words, but they can't change who I am inside, and I want you to remember that, Nina." Her eyes wandered around their small, love-filled apartment, the shelves lined with thick language textbooks, her own well-worn journal on the table where she scribbled daily notes. These were testaments to Zoe's perseverance, intellect, and quiet pride. Despite life's hardships, she'd never lost faith in her own value. Late at night, the street lamp outside flickered like a reminder that everyone in this vast city fights their own battles. Zoe pressed a soft kiss to her sister's forehead, then rose and crossed the room to prepare for her nightly language lesson. She opened her foreign language text and began reading aloud in a smooth, lyrical voice. In that moment, Zoe Brooks's world was no longer defined by Leonard Dawson's mocking laughter or the dismissive glances she'd endured. It was defined by her fierce passion for knowledge, her love of words, and her steadfast determination to prove, to the world and to herself, the extraordinary value she had nurtured all these years. Beneath the dim glow of the city lights, Zoe Brooks continued her silent, steady journey toward recognition, not just for herself, but for her sister Nina, who watched her with eyes full of admiration and love. Zoe's gentle foreign language reading drifted softly into the quiet night. Her dreamy eyes stared down at the page, each familiar line guiding her mind back to distant days in beloved Paris, where she'd lived through the most beautiful years of her life. Her gaze softened, her breath even, and in an instant she was back in that moment. The first day she set foot at the prestigious Sciences Po, when Paris sunlight flooded every cobblestone street. She remembered her heart pounding with nervous excitement, her hands trembling, and the overwhelming awe she felt seeing students from around the world, bright, ambitious people with grand dreams. She had been one of them, an American undergrad with soft curls, healthy brown skin, and eyes that sparkled with passion. Zoe stood out not only for her academic excellence, but for her gift with languages, fluent in French, Italian, and Spanish, earning the respect of her peers and high expectations from her professors. In that vivid memory, she recalled a chilly autumn afternoon when Professor Etienne Laurent, a learned older man with silver hair and sharp eyes behind small spectacles, had asked her to stay after class. Zoe had approached his desk hesitantly, heart racing. But instead of reprimand, he offered a warm smile and gentle praise. "Miss Brooks, I have taught many gifted students, but seldom have I encountered someone with your linguistic prowess. The ability to bridge cultures through language is the most precious gift one can possess. Remember that well." Zoe's heart had skipped a beat at those words. That encouragement became a powerful force, reinforcing herself, belief, and affirming her true value. Over the following months in Paris, Zoe immersed herself in discovery, study, and research. She joined lively seminars, wrote an outstanding paper on the role of multilingual diplomacy in resolving international conflicts, and even represented her school at an international forum in Geneva, confidently addressing hundreds of diplomats, earning thunderous applause, and securing her reputation as a promising young talent. But at the height of her bright future, Zoe received a fateful call from the U.S. on a cold Paris afternoon. The news shattered her world. Her father had suffered a sudden stroke and passed away, shortly after her mother had succumbed to cancer. Nina, her only younger sister, then just 13, was left an orphan with no one else to turn to. Zoe stood frozen in her cramped dorm room, breath caught in her throat, tears welling in her eyes, her heart breaking. The next day, Zoe went straight to Professor Lauren's office to tell him she had to return to America immediately, unable to complete her studies or her unfinished thesis. When he heard the news, he was silent for a long moment before gently placing his hand on her shoulder, his eyes full of understanding and regret. "Zoe, I am deeply sorry, but I understand and support your decision. There are things in life more important than career or fame, and you have chosen rightly. Remember that the knowledge you gained here is yours forever. It will be your strength in the days ahead." On the flight back to the U.S., Zoe gazed at Paris one last time through the airplane window, tears streaming down her face. She knew she was leaving a dream behind, but she was certain that coming home to care for Nina was the only path she could take. The months that followed in New York were tougher than Zoe had imagined. Beyond grieving both parents, she faced the pressure of earning a living, providing for her sister, and putting her academic dreams on hold. Waiting tables at La Papillon, humble and at times painful, was her only way to cover living expenses. Yet, even after abandoning Paris and her promising career, Zoe never surrendered her love of knowledge and languages. Every tired night after work, she sat quietly in her small room, opening the same books that had accompanied her in elegant Paris, continuing to read and write so she wouldn't lose herself amid life's hardships. In the silent darkness of that night's room, Zoe blinked back tears as she remembered Paris. Though that beautiful past had receded and the present was hard and unjust, Zoe Brooks never regretted her choice. Her sacrifice highlighted her dignity and proved that a person's true worth lies not in fame or accolades, but in the choices they make when life turns against them. Outside, the city lights still shimmered brightly, as though comforting Zoe with the promise that one day soon, the world would know her not merely as a humble waitress, but as the remarkable person she was always meant to be. The city lights still sparkled beyond the window of her tiny apartment, like a distant promise to Zoe that the world hadn't forgotten what she truly deserved. Yet, caught between that far-off hope and the harsh reality, Zoe knew she had to keep moving forward with quiet persistence, at least for now. The next few days at La Papillon passed relatively smoothly. Zoe did her best to ignore the cutting words Leonard Dawson had aimed at her. She reminded herself to focus on her work, on her sister Nina, on the good things she was slowly building. But life didn't let her off so easily. Just when Zoe began to believe the storm had passed, the restaurant door swung open again, and in walked Leonard Dawson, flanked by another circle of powerful businessmen, his arrogant gaze and smirk exactly as she remembered. From behind the serving station, Zoe immediately recognized Leonard's booming laugh, so confident it cut through the soft background music. She took a slow, steady breath, smoothed her apron, and approached the table with the calm she had learned to summon. "Good evening. Are you ready to order?" Zoe asked politely, her voice gentle as always, giving nothing away. Leonard Dawson looked up, eyes lighting with amused recognition. His lips curled into that familiar haughty smile. "Well, if it isn't our little server again," he called out, deliberately loud so everyone at the table could hear. "Last time, she gave me such a special experience with a French menu." The men around him, new faces but the same cold, curious amusement, turned to Zoe as if awaiting fresh entertainment. Zoe held her stance, unflinching, though her heart ached with familiar pain. "Let's see if she's improved any today," Leonard continued, theatrically flipping open the menu. His eyes darted over the French descriptions, then settled on a complex dish, his expression daring her. "I'll have this one. Confit de canard à l'orange. Right, server? Or do I need to explain what that is again?" Laughter rang out immediately, the cruel kind that tightened Zoe's chest. Still, she kept her face composed, determined not to let him see how much it hurt. "Yes, sir. Confit de canard à l'orange is an excellent choice," Zoe replied with perfect, flawless French pronunciation. That only seemed to delight Leonard more. He laughed and, mockingly, applauded her perseverance. "Oh, how admirable! You must have practiced long hours to get that right. I really admire your dedication, little server." The table erupted in laughter again, and Zoe felt smaller and more alone than ever in that grand, opulent dining room. Yet she remained poised and courteous, holding back the surge of emotion within. "Thank you, sir. I'll send your order to the kitchen right away," she said softly, then turned and hurried through the kitchen door to escape Leonard's mocking gaze. No sooner had she stepped inside than a gentle voice spoke beside her. "Zoe, are you okay?" It was Jake, the new server with kind blue eyes who'd joined a few days earlier. He'd witnessed the whole scene, and his worry was plain. "I'm fine," Zoe forced a small smile. "But why didn't you stand up to him? A guy like that deserves a lesson," Jake said, anger flashing in his eyes. Zoe was silent for a moment, her eyes reflecting a deep, knowing calm. Then she answered quietly but firmly, "Jake, sometimes silence isn't surrender. Just because I didn't speak now doesn't mean I won't ever. When I truly raise my voice, they won't know where to look." Jake regarded her curiously, still puzzled by her words. Zoe simply patted his shoulder with a mysterious smile and slipped away toward the kitchen. Back at the table, Leonard Dawson continued his loud boasts to his wealthy friends, completely unaware that behind Zoe's composed exterior, she was quietly preparing for the day she would speak out. A day when everyone who had ever belittled her would fall silent and bow before the true power of her knowledge and self. Respect. Outside the restaurant, the city lights continued to blaze, illuminating Zoe's face as if to remind her once more, that day will come. And when it does, the world will have no choice but to face her. The city lights continued to glitter outside her small apartment window, like a distant promise to Zoe that the world hadn't forgotten what she deserved. Yet between those far-off assurances and the harsh reality, Zoe knew she had to keep moving forward with quiet persistence, at least for now. The following days at La Papillon passed fairly smoothly. Zoe did her best not to dwell on Leonard Dawson's hurtful words. She reminded herself to focus on her work, on her sister Nina, and on the good things she was building. But life wouldn't let her off that easily. Just when Zoe began to believe the storm had passed, the restaurant door swung open once more. And in walked Leonard Dawson, flanked by another group of powerful business people, his arrogant gaze and smirk unchanged. From behind the serving station, Zoe immediately recognized Leonard's distinctive, booming laugh. It cut through the soft background music like a declaration of overconfidence. She inhaled slowly, straightened her apron, and approached the table with the calm she had practiced over and over. "Good evening. Are you ready to order?" Zoe asked politely, her tone as gentle as ever, concealing any hint of emotion. Leonard Dawson looked up, his eyes lighting with amusement when he spotted her. A familiar, haughty smile curled at the corner of his mouth. "Well, if it isn't our little server," he said, deliberately loud so the whole table heard. "Last time she gave me quite the special experience with that French menu." The men around him, new faces but the same cold curiosity, turned to Zoe as if awaiting fresh entertainment. Zoe held her posture steady, unshaken, though her heart ached with that familiar sting. "Let's see if she's improved today," Leonard continued, theatrically flipping open the menu. He scanned the French descriptions and stopped at an elaborate dish, his eyes challenging her. "I'll have this one, confit de canard à l'orange. Right, server? Or would you like me to explain what it is again?" Laughter erupted immediately, cruel and mocking. Zoe felt her chest tighten as if someone had squeezed it, but she kept her face composed, determined not to let him see her hurt. "Yes, sir. Confit de canard à l'orange is an excellent choice," she replied, pronouncing every French word perfectly. That only seemed to delight Leonard further. He laughed loudly and, mockingly, applauded her dedication. "Oh, how admirable! You must have practiced for hours to get that right. I truly admire your perseverance, little server." More laughter followed, and Zoe felt smaller and more alone than ever in that grand, opulent room. Yet she remained polite and professional, fighting back the flood of emotion rising inside her. "Thank you, sir. I'll send your order to the kitchen right away," she said softly, then turned and hurried through the kitchen door, escaping Leonard's mocking gaze. No sooner had she stepped inside than a gentle voice spoke beside her. "Zoe, are you okay?" It was Jake, the new server with clear blue eyes and a kind heart. He'd witnessed the entire scene, and his concern was evident. "I'm fine," Zoe forced a reassuring smile. "But why didn't you stand up to him? A guy like that deserves a lesson," Jake said, anger flashing in his eyes. Zoe paused, her eyes reflecting a deep, hidden resolve. Then, quietly but firmly, she answered, "Jake, sometimes silence isn't surrender. Just because I didn't speak now doesn't mean I never will. When I truly raise my voice, they won't know where to look." Jake looked at her with curiosity, still puzzling over her words. Zoe simply patted his shoulder with a mysterious smile and headed back to her station. Back at the table, Leonard Dawson continued boasting loudly to his wealthy companions, completely unaware that behind Zoe's calm exterior, she was quietly preparing for the day she would speak out, the day when everyone who had ever belittled her would be silenced by the real power of her knowledge and self. Respect. Outside the restaurant, the city lights kept twinkling brightly across Zoe's face, as if to remind her once more. That day will come, and when it does, the world will no longer be able to look away. The tension still lingered in La Papillon's elegant banquet hall after Zoe's polite but razor-sharp correction. The powerful guests now exchanged discreet glances toward Leonard Dawson, as if silently reassessing the image of the once supremely confident billionaire. Leonard stood frozen for a moment, striving to maintain a composed expression, but it was clear his arrogance had taken a serious hit. In that instant, from the far end of the table, a distinguished middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and tasteful round spectacles spoke up. It was Jacques Monroe, a renowned French investor celebrated for his refined taste and acuity in international finance. His voice was warm, courteous, and laced with genuine surprise as he looked directly at Zoe. "Excuse me," he began. "Are you Zoe Brooks, the speaker who delivered that outstanding address on multilingual diplomacy at the Geneva conference a few years ago?" The room fell into absolute silence. The VIPs all turned toward Zoe, their faces a mix of curiosity and astonishment. Zoe felt a flicker of embarrassment at the unexpected question. She never imagined any of tonight's guests would remember that event. "Yes," she replied with a modest nod. "I did present in Geneva." Jacques Monroe's face lit up with genuine delight. He turned to the others, clearly excited. "I remember that talk quite well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Zoe Brooks, one of the most exceptional young speakers at the International Forum on Multilingual Diplomacy in Geneva. I recall her compelling insights on how language plays a vital role in resolving global conflicts. Everyone present that day, myself included, was deeply impressed by her intellect and eloquence." Murmurs of amazement rippled through the banquet. The VIPs exchanged looks of newfound respect and intrigue. They were beginning to realize that the seemingly ordinary young server before them was far more remarkable than they'd assumed. "She really did speak in Geneva?" a young businesswoman whispered to her neighbor, eyes wide with surprise. Jacques nodded enthusiastically and continued with evident admiration. "That's right. She was a top student at Sciences Po Paris, fluent in several languages, and highly regarded by the academic community. I never expected to see her here tonight, in this very restaurant." All attention fixed on Zoe, while Leonard Dawson remained rooted to the spot. His face shifted from pale to flushed red, a humiliation he'd never experienced before spreading through him, he who had always considered himself above everyone. Only now did he recognize the grave mistake of underestimating Zoe, a person he never thought could ever embarrass him in front of so many of Manhattan's most powerful figures. Leonard felt the scrutinizing, unsympathetic stares of those VIP guests bearing down on him. In that moment, for the first time, he lost all composure as his pride crumbled before the very people who once lauded him, all because of a server he'd dismissed as insignificant. He fumbled for a witty retort to save face, but every thought deserted him. Throughout it all, Zoe stood calm, her eyes shining with quiet pride. She added softly, as if reaffirming her identity to the astonished crowd, "It means a great deal that you remember my Geneva talk, Mr. Monroe. I've always believed that mutual respect and the power of language are key to solving any problem, whether in diplomacy or everyday life." Her gentle words rang clear and strong, earning discreet nods of agreement from several guests. In that moment, Zoe was no longer just a server. To everyone present, she became a young intellectual, a woman of dignity and learning, internationally recognized and admired. In the ensuing hush, Leonard Dawson grasped the full extent of how badly he'd misjudged Zoe. Where there had once been contempt, now lay his shame. He dared not meet anyone's gaze. The self-assured billionaire was now the one standing alone, humiliated before the very crowd that once held him in high esteem. Zoe offered a courteous bow, then quietly stepped away from the table, leaving behind an atmosphere charged with respect and wonder. Jacques Monroe watched her go with warm admiration, while Leonard Dawson sat in stunned silence, feeling a depth of humiliation he'd never known. The banquet hall fell silent once more, but this time all eyes were on Zoe Brooks, the very person they'd underestimated only minutes before. The crystal chandeliers overhead seemed to shine even brighter, illuminating the portrait of a woman whom no one would ever again dare to underestimate. Soft applause and admiring glances still followed Zoe as she left the banquet table, leaving behind a hush of respectful surprise. In a shadowed corner of the restaurant, Leonard Dawson stood motionless, his hollow eyes fixed on the glass of wine before him. For the first time in his life, the man who prided himself on his power and feigned wisdom felt utterly defeated and small. He was engulfed by a profound confusion as all his mistaken assumptions about Zoe collapsed before his eyes. Meanwhile, Madame Delphine Martin, the elegant and refined owner of La Papillon, had witnessed the entire scene from afar. She approached Zoe quietly, her eyes brimming with discreet pride and satisfaction. In a warm, motherly tone, she encouraged her protégée. "Zoe, what you just did was truly admirable. I believe we have another important event this evening, a special international networking gathering in the VIP room. But unfortunately, our interpreter has just canceled unexpectedly. Would you help me by serving as interpreter for this meeting?" Zoe was momentarily taken aback, then quickly regained her composure. She recognized this as the perfect opportunity to prove her true worth, not just to Leonard, but to everyone who had ever doubted her. "Of course, Madame Martin, I'd be honored," Zoe replied softly yet confidently, her heart fluttering with excitement. Minutes later, Zoe Rhee entered the VIP room transformed. She wore a simple but elegant evening gown, her hair swept up to reveal a radiant, intelligent face. From the moment she stepped inside, the international guests were captivated by her charm and effortless poise. Leonard stood at the far edge of the room, silently observing. His heart skipped when he realized the brilliant woman commanding everyone's attention was Zoe Brooks, the very person he had once dismissed. He felt, for the first time, the bitter sting of having underestimated her. Confusion and bitterness mingled in his chest, yet beneath it all lay an undeniable, unspoken respect. In the VIP salon, Zoe stepped forward and began interpreting the guest's conversation with fluent ease. She seamlessly switched between French, Italian, and Spanish, earning appreciative nods for her linguistic prowess. The attendees were awestruck. Not only did she translate words, but she also conveyed cultural nuances, making the dialogue richer and more meaningful. An Italian guest exclaimed with admiration, "This is incredible! She's not just an interpreter, she's like a professional diplomat." Jacques Monroe, present at the gathering, smiled approvingly and added, "Indeed, true talent cannot stay hidden. I'm so glad we've had the chance to witness Zoe's excellence tonight." From his vantage point, Leonard listened to the praise, feeling his humiliation deepen. The people who once lauded him were now enthralled by a woman he had once ridiculed. Zoe continued her work with graceful authority, her soothing yet powerful voice resonating in every listener's heart, opening new cultural horizons and dispelling any prejudice about status or appearance. In the eyes of these prestigious international guests, Zoe Brooks was no longer merely a server. She had become a symbol of intelligence, culture, and grace. As the event drew to a close, Zoe gave a modest bow to rousing applause. Her gaze happened to meet Leonard's across the room. For the first time, Zoe saw genuine regret and helplessness in the arrogant billionaire's eyes. He quickly looked away, ashamed, marking the first moment in his life he truly felt his pride slip away. When the gathering ended, Zoe returned to Madame Martin, who nodded in satisfaction and offered heartfelt thanks. "Zoe, you were outstanding. Tonight you not only saved the event but made us all proud to work alongside you." Zoe smiled humbly, her heart light yet brimming with pride. In that moment she knew everything had changed. The door she thought had closed forever was now wide open, shining a path to a future far more hopeful and brilliant. Far away, Leonard silently departed the event in bitter silence, leaving behind the image of Zoe Brooks, confident and dignified, the woman he would never dare underestimate again. The moment the VIP room door closed behind Zoe, genuine applause and heartfelt praise still echoed through La Papillon's elegant halls. In just a few hours, word had spread like wildfire about the young American server who had earned the admiration of Manhattan's most powerful business figures. International guests, led enthusiastically by Jacques Monroe, took to social media to share their genuine impressions, sparking lively discussions across business, cultural, and educational forums. By the next morning, Zoe Brooks's name was the talk of the town among entrepreneurs and investors. Economic and culture publications featured her in numerous articles, marveling at her top-notch academic background at Sciences Po and her celebrated role as a speaker at the Geneva Conference years before. Madame Delphine Martin quickly realized this was more than a lucky break. It was a turning point for the restaurant. With her keen business acumen, she decided to leverage Zoe's newfound fame to expand the Le Papillon brand into the European market, starting in Paris, her own hometown, where cultural prestige reigns supreme. One bright morning, Delphine summoned Zoe to her office. The room's calm classic decor put Zoe at ease as she entered. Delphine spoke warmly, her eyes shining with trust and respect. "Zoe, I'm sure you're aware of what's happening around us. I've received countless calls and emails from high-profile international clients. They all want to learn more about the woman who completely changed their view of hospitality." Zoe nodded modestly, her eyes lighting up. "I was just doing what felt right, madame." Delphine smiled gently and continued in a serious yet affectionate tone. "Your humility and exceptional talent have inspired me. I'd like you to become our cultural advisor and language trainer for new staff as we enter the European market. It's a big responsibility, but I have every confidence you'll excel." Zoe's heart raced with happiness and gratitude. After all she'd endured, she finally received the opportunity her abilities deserved. "I'm honored by this offer, madam. I'll give it my all and won't let you down," she replied, her voice steady and sincere. Meanwhile, Leonard Dawson soon realized that his earlier disrespect toward Zoe had far graver consequences than he ever imagined. One late afternoon, in his sleek office atop a downtown skyscraper, he received a terse, firm call from Paris, where he was on the verge of closing a multi-million-dollar deal. "Mr. Dawson, I'm sorry to inform you that our Parisian partner has decided to terminate their contract with your company. They became aware of your treatment of Miss Zoe Brooks, who was once highly respected at the International Forum in Geneva, and refuse to work with anyone who shows such a lack of basic respect for human dignity." Leonard froze, the phone trembling in his hand, as anger and disappointment coursed through him. Only then did he truly understand the magnitude of his mistake in underestimating Zoe. His ridicule and arrogance had not only humiliated him before the city's power brokers, but also inflicted direct damage on his reputation and bottom line. In the days that followed, Leonard nearly vanished from public view. Rumors of the lost Paris contract spread rapidly, undermining his once rock-solid business standing. Partners began to rethink their associations, and he realized with growing dread that the reputation he once treasured was crumbling fast. Meanwhile, Zoe embraced her new role at La Papillon, becoming a beacon of progress in hospitality and business culture. She led language classes and cultural training for incoming staff, inspiring them with her own story. The restaurant buzzed with renewed energy as every employee felt more valued and respected thanks to Zoe's influence. Zoe's renown grew ever wider. She was no longer simply a server. She had become an emblem of dignity, intellect, and perseverance in the face of adversity. Far away, in his lonely office, Leonard Dawson sat in silent remorse. The once powerful billionaire now understood all too well that his arrogance and misjudgment had cost him dearly, and there was no longer any way to undo the damage. While Zoe began to reap the just rewards of her relentless efforts, in another corner of the city, Leonard Dawson was confronted with a completely opposite reality. The fallout from his arrogant and careless behavior had started to spread, infiltrating every nook and cranny of his personal life and business. Just days after news broke of Leonard losing that crucial Paris contract, a highly serious closed-door meeting was held at a luxury Midtown Manhattan hotel. In a spacious conference room paneled in fine wood, Jacques Monroe and his international partners sat around a long table, their faces grave, thoughtful, and watchful. A heavy silence hung over the room, underscoring the gravity of the matter under discussion. Jacques Monroe was the first to speak, his tone measured but weighty. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we all understand why we're here today. Mr. Leonard Dawson's recent actions haven't just damaged his personal reputation, they've cast a negative shadow over all of us who are collaborating on this project." A German partner chimed in immediately, his sharp gaze betraying clear disappointment. "I completely agree with Mr. Monroe. We cannot continue to work with someone who disrespects fundamental values of conduct and communication. The issue isn't only that Mr. Dawson lost a major contract. It's that he's lost our trust." Others around the table nodded in agreement, some visibly angry. Among them were individuals who had once been closest to and most confident in Leonard, but now felt betrayed by his arrogance and lack of respect. After a contemplative pause, Jacques Monroe delivered the final decision with firm clarity. "We have decided that Leonard Dawson will no longer be part of this project. We need a partner who not only excels in business acumen, but also embodies core values of respect and human dignity." The resolution landed like a cold decree, yet there were no objections. Everyone understood it was the only sensible choice. Shortly thereafter, in his office atop a midtown skyscraper, Leonard sat motionless at his grand desk, eyes fixed on empty space, consumed by anxiety and confusion. In that oppressive quiet, a soft knock at the door jolted him back to reality. His young assistant, Adam, entered with a visibly tense expression. Avoiding Leonard's gaze, he spoke haltingly. "Mr. Dawson, I just received word from our Paris partners. They held a closed meeting this morning, and they've decided to terminate their collaboration with us. You're no longer part of the project, sir." Leonard heard the words clearly, but could hardly believe them. It felt as though his world was collapsing. Staring at Adam in shock, his voice trembling with anger. "What are you saying? How can they do this? Over one small mistake?" Adam hesitated, then continued cautiously. "They said this decision isn't just about that error. It's because of how you treated Miss Zoe Brooks, someone they'd once held in high regard at the International Geneva Forum. To them, it wasn't a minor slip-up, but evidence that you're unfit to represent the project." Leonard fell silent, overwhelmed by a bitter sense of shame. He realized at last that his misstep wasn't merely a careless remark or momentary lapse in control, but the product of years of arrogance and prejudice he himself had sown. Now he was forced to swallow the bitter fruits of his own doing. Adam quietly left, leaving Leonard alone to stare at the window glass that reflected his failed visage. Leonard Dawson, the man who once prided himself that nothing could shake his standing, was left with nothing but bitterness, shame, and utter despair. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Zoe was diligently embracing her new role, completely unaware that in the lofty heights Leonard once held dear, he was grappling with the very real consequences of the disrespect he'd shown her. Leonard now understood that he'd lost far more than he ever imagined. Not just a major contract, but the trust, respect, and the reputation he'd spent a lifetime building. While Leonard Dawson sat dazed, staring at the city lights flickering mockingly outside his office window, life on the other side of town moved at an entirely different pace for Zoe Brooks. She worked tirelessly, busy organizing language and cultural training programs for La Papillon's new staff, programs built on her unwavering belief in the power of knowledge and mutual respect. One late afternoon, as Zoe took a rare break after teaching a class, she stood quietly by the small employee-only window, watching the sunset-tinted clouds overhead. She heard soft, hesitant footsteps behind her and turned to see a familiar face twisted with nervous tension. It was Justin, Leonard Dawson's youngest assistant, always shy and rarely speaking up in front of his boss. Today, he looked distinctly uneasy, his eyes downcast and reluctant. "Hello, Miss Brooks," Justin said in a low, trembling voice, barely audible. Zoe offered a gentle nod, her calm eyes tinged with curiosity. She sensed that Justin wouldn't have sought her out without a significant reason. He hesitated, fingers brushing his sleeve as he gathered courage, then took a deep breath and continued. I came to apologize, Miss Brooks. I know this should have come from Mr. Dawson himself, but He couldn't bring himself to do it. He truly regrets what happened, and I hope you can understand." Zoe fell silent, studying Justin for a long moment. She neither felt anger nor joy, just quiet reflection on his words. The silence stretched until Justin, growing more flustered, looked down at the floor, then back at her, waiting for a response. Finally, Zoe spoke, her voice soft but steady, carrying a message she wanted Justin to grasp fully. "Justin, do you know why I've stayed silent in the face of insults and scorn all this time? It's because I understand that no one truly sees me until they learn to listen." Justin froze at her words, eyes wide with astonishment. He had never imagined that, after all the wounds and mockery Zoe endured, she could respond with such composure and depth. In that moment, he realized she was more than just a strong woman. She possessed a profound intellect and dignity few could match. Zoe looked deeply into Justin's sincere, bewildered eyes and added quietly, "I don't need an indirect apology from Mr. Dawson or anyone else, Justin. What I've always wanted is genuine respect, and I hope that from now on he, and anyone who's ever looked down on others, will understand the true value of listening and empathy." Justin stood motionless, unsure how to reply. He felt Zoe's words ignite something deep within, a truth he'd never recognized before. He realized she'd just given him a priceless lesson about self, respect and kindness, values he vowed to carry forward. Zoe offered a small, proud smile and turned to leave the employee lounge with a dignified grace. Justin watched her go, his heart filled with admiration and respect. He wondered whether Leonard Dawson would ever truly grasp Zoe Brooks's worth as he now did. As Zoe strode confidently down the hallway, her gaze fixed purposefully ahead, her words weren't just a response to Leonard or a message to Justin. They were a declaration to everyone who's ever judged another by appearance or status. Meanwhile, Justin remained still, his heart awakened by the deep truths Zoe had shared. For the first time, he understood that power and wealth don't define a person's value. Rather, it's the intellect, self, respect, and dignity they carry within. Leonard, although he hadn't witnessed that moment, would soon learn that his indirect apology couldn't undo the consequences he now faced. He had lost not only the trust of those who once supported him, but also the final chance to truly appreciate and honor an extraordinary woman like Zoe Brooks. Now, Zoe had fully stepped out of the shadow of contempt, strong, proud, and unwavering. She knew that from this day forward, no one could ignore her, because when she speaks, the whole world will be forced to listen. From the very moment Zoe stepped out of the staff room with her head held high, she knew a new chapter of her life had truly begun. The words she shared with Justin were not just a release for herself, but also the starting point of a journey she had always dreamed of, using knowledge and language to inspire others and transform the way people view hospitality and mutual respect. Before long, Zoe officially accepted Madame Delphine Martin's offer to become La Papillon's language and cultural instructor. Her first class was held in a cozy, simply furnished room behind the restaurant, where everyone from eager young servers to seasoned chefs gathered, excited to learn from her. Standing at the front of the room, Zoe wore her trademark gentle smile, her eyes sparkling with passion as she addressed them. "Welcome, everyone, to our very first language and culture class. Before we begin, I want you to know that the most important part of serving isn't just bringing dishes to the table. It's how we show respect and understanding through our words and attitudes." Her students listened intently, their faces lighting up with admiration for Zoe's confidence and composure. She continued, her voice warm yet powerful. "Language isn't just a set of dry words. It's an art of conveying emotion and culture. When we choose the right words and tone, we're not just serving customers, we're creating memorable experiences. That is the true value of our work, communication by both heart and mind. Every sentence Zoe spoke resonated like a soft yet mighty melody, reaching deep into each learner's mind and reshaping their understanding of their daily roles. Soon, Zoe's classes became the highlight of everyone's workday at La Papillon. The atmosphere shifted noticeably as each team member eagerly applied the fresh, insightful lessons Zoe provided in their interactions with guests. One afternoon, as Zoe guided a group of apprentices through the subtle, precise pronunciation of French dish names, Madame Delphine slipped quietly into the room. She stood at the back, beaming with pride at Zoe's dedication and the students' enthusiasm. "I'm so pleased to see you all studying with such seriousness," Delphine said, her tone gentle but proud. "What Zoe is teaching you isn't just communication or language skills. It's a lesson in the real value of our daily work." Turning to Zoe with affectionate admiration, she added, "Zoe, I'm deeply grateful for what you're doing. You're transforming this restaurant not only in customer service, but also in our culture and in each employee's sense of dignity." The class erupted into enthusiastic applause, their faces glowing with pride to learn from such a devoted teacher. Zoe bowed her head humbly, her heart full as she witnessed the clear, positive changes she had helped bring about. Meanwhile, across the city, Leonard Dawson continued to wrestle with his bitterness and sense of failure, confronting the fallout of his own arrogance. News that Zoe had become La Papillon's cultural instructor reached him swiftly, deepening his shame and regret. He couldn't help but recall the day he first met Zoe, a humble server he had once dismissed, who was now universally respected and admired. Leonard recognized that his greatest error had been viewing others through a lens of pride and contempt, rather than seeking to understand their true value. He had underestimated Zoe, and paid the price with his reputation, career, and the trust of his key partners. Back in Zoe's classroom, every employee was now eager to practice what they'd learned. Their service style had changed completely. Each interaction was marked by genuine attention, respectful language, and attentive listening. Guests began to notice the restaurant's positive transformation, and La Papillon's reputation spread further, not just for its exquisite cuisine, but for its refined, courteous service. Thanks to these tangible results, Zoe quickly became deeply respected and loved by the entire staff. They saw her not only as a dedicated teacher, but also as a source of inspiration and motivation to continually affirm their own worth and dignity in their daily work. In that brief, shining moment, Zoe glanced around the classroom at her students' eager, bright eyes and knew she had finally found the right path for her knowledge and experience. Zoe Brooks was no longer the overlooked server. She had become the proud language instructor, a symbol of self, respect, and positive change in the small community she cherished. The language and culture classes at La Papillon have grown ever more renowned, attracting widespread attention. Zoe could feel her life gradually unfolding into a new chapter, one written with self, respect, perseverance, and a fierce love of learning. Every evening, when Zoe returned to her little apartment, she sensed more clearly the transformation her life was undergoing. What had once been a bare, cold studio now felt warm and full of life. Zoe's small bookshelf was steadily filling up with volumes on languages, cultures, and philosophy. On the old wooden desk she used to prepare her lessons stood a small vase of fresh flowers, their gentle fragrance brightening the room. The soft, golden glow from her reading lamps spread a cozy light throughout the apartment, a stark contrast to the lonely, dark nights she once endured. One weekend evening, Zoe was curled up on her tiny sofa, relaxing with a book, when the door suddenly swung open. Nina burst in with a radiant smile, enveloping Zoe in an excited hug. "Zoe, you won't believe it. Today my friends couldn't stop talking about you. Everyone admires you so much. I'm really proud of you." Zoe smiled softly, setting her book aside and wrapping her arms around her sister. "I'm glad you're proud of me. But, Nina, you know the most important thing is that we believe in our own worth, no matter what anyone else says." Nina looked deep into Zoe's eyes, her gaze full of trust and understanding. "I know, Zoe, but I really want you to know that what you're doing matters. Not just to me, but to so many others. You're changing people's lives. Did you realize that?" Zoe was quietly moved, her heart swelling with genuine happiness at her sister's encouragement. In that moment, she knew that every hardship and trial she had faced was worth it, because at last she had found true meaning in her life, helping and inspiring others through knowledge and dignity. While Zoe savored this simple joy with her sister, across town Leonard Dawson was experiencing a completely different evening. He sat alone in his sleek, upscale apartment, eyes vacant as he stared out at the star-studded night sky, feeling not a trace of peace. Everything around him seemed meaningless. He realized he had lost the most precious things in life. Not just his reputation, power, or wealth, but the respect and trust of those who once believed in him. Leonard wondered if, given the chance to turn back time, he might choose differently. But he knew that answer no longer mattered. The consequences of his arrogance and disdain for others were irreversible. Back in Zoe's warm apartment, the evening continued in soft laughter between the two sisters. Nina listened intently as Zoe shared her promising plans for the future. Their ideas to expand her language classes, invitations for her to speak at international conferences. In Zoe's voice rang a fierce belief in a bright future she once thought would never be hers. "I believe life always offers a second chance, as long as we're brave enough to take it," Zoe said, her eyes shining with confidence and hope. Nina nodded, her eyes sparkling with faith. "I always believe in you, Zoe. You are living proof that no matter how harsh life gets, we can overcome it and come out stronger. You've already done it." Zoe returned her sister's gaze with a gentle smile, feeling joy radiate through her heart, as if washing away all the sorrow and disappointment of her past. For the first time in years, Zoe felt truly free, not only from others' prejudices and scorn, but also free to live the life she had always dreamed of. Before going to bed, Zoe stood at the window, gazing out at the city's twinkling lights, savoring each peaceful breath, each moment of joy that swelled within her. She knew that, from this day forward, she no longer needed to fear or doubt the future, because the door of opportunity was wide open before her. At last, Zoe Brooks had found her true path, not through revenge or resentment, but through knowledge, self, respect, and sincerity. She understood that life's real value doesn't lie in how others see you, but in how you perceive yourself and live authentically. In that moment, Zoe allowed herself a quiet smile, her heart at peace, her spirit serene, ready to step confidently into a future she would write herself, one filled with light and hope, a future she deserved to embrace in every single moment. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers still sparkled throughout the elegant dining room of Les Papillons. Zoe stood by the large window, gazing down at the city's twinkling lights, a profound sense of peace and happiness swelling in her heart. The months of suffering and loneliness, the quiet tears shed in darkness, seemed to have vanished completely, replaced now by a confident pride in all she had achieved. One evening, as the restaurant buzzed with guests, Zoe glided into the center of the dining room with her usual grace. Tonight, she wore a simple, yet exquisite, pale blue dress, her hair swept up to reveal her radiant, proud face. In her hand, she held a special menu, and with effortless poise, she introduced each dish in flawless musical French, enchanting every diner into rapt attention. At a nearby table, a little girl of about 6 with golden curls and bright blue eyes stared at Zoe, utterly captivated. Her mother, noticing her daughter's genuine admiration, smiled and asked gently, "Do you like her?" The little girl nodded furiously, eyes never leaving Zoe. "Yes, Mom. She's so beautiful and she speaks like a princess." "Who is she?" Her mother looked at Zoe with affectionate pride, smoothing her daughter's hair as she spoke warmly and sincerely. "She's more than a princess, sweetie. She's a woman of great knowledge, dignity, and courage. You know, you don't need a crown to be a princess. People become one when they prove their true worth through talent and a kind heart." Zoe heard those words as she finished introducing the menu and turned back toward the service station. Her heart leapt with emotion and joy. Such gentle praise carried tremendous meaning for her, for at last she was truly seen, recognized, and respected in the way she had always deserved. The little girl waved her tiny hand enthusiastically and smiled up at Zoe. Zoe returned the smile, warmth flooding her heart. In that instant, she realized that every hardship, every disappointment, every quiet sacrifice had been more than worthwhile, for they had led her to this perfect moment. In a shadowed corner near the entrance stood a familiar figure, Leonard Dawson. He had come here long before, lingering unseen, quietly witnessing everything, from Zoe's confident presence to the way her beautiful words won every guest's heart, to the moment the mother spoke of Zoe's true worth. Leonard felt his heart heavy with deep regret, but also filled with profound respect for the woman he had once dismissed. Now he truly understood what he had lost. Not just reputation or wealth, but the chance to know someone like Zoe, a woman of extraordinary inner strength, capable of changing perceptions with every word she spoke. Silently, Leonard turned away and left the restaurant, leaving Zoe behind, radiant and self-assured beneath La Papillon's enchanted lights. He knew he would never forget this night, the night he finally grasped the value of humility, self-respect, and the power of truly listening, lessons Zoe had taught him in a way both bitter and deeply poignant. As the evening wound down, Zoe stepped outside and looked up at the star-dotted sky, drawing a deep breath to soak in the peace and joy filling her soul. Nina padded up beside her and hugged her tightly, whispering into her sister's ear, "See? Everyone finally sees you now. I always knew this day would come." Zoe smiled softly, nodding, "Yes, Nina, but I think the most important thing isn't that others see me. It's that I have learned to see my own worth and to live by what I believe in." Together, they stood beneath the glimmering stars, sharing this beautiful, meaningful moment in tranquility and true happiness. Zoe knew her journey was far from over, but now she was stronger, more confident, and ready for any challenge ahead, because she understood that a person's true value comes from the heart, from knowledge, and from courage. From this day forward, Zoe Brooks's life had turned a brand, new page, one she richly deserved, filled with meaning and light. And Zoe knew that no matter what the future held, she would walk her own path with the dignity, self-respect, and confidence no one could ever take away. Zoe Brooks's story stands as undeniable proof that a person's worth isn't measured by outward appearance or social status, but by the knowledge, integrity, and self-respect they carry in their heart. Have you ever experienced or witnessed a situation like Zoe's? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you love inspiring stories of self-respect and perseverance in the face of adversity like this one, don't forget to hit the like button, share this story with friends and family, and subscribe so you never miss any meaningful content in the future. Thank you, and see you next time.